We've got first speaker is Lane Procter. So Lane was originally a student at Leeds, Beckett, and then went away, spent a bit of time in Australia, and then did her strength and conditioning at Gloucester University. She's now come back and is partnered with Millfield School, doing her PhD, as well as working as a strength and conditioning practitioner there and with Bristol Bears women. So, here you are, Lynn.
Thank you, Fionn. So over the next year or two, I hope to really look at what athleticism is. So look at measuring athleticism and having a look at possible interventions and longitudinal tracking of athleticism. But what we need to do first is actually try to figure out what athleticism is. So Kev has already stolen my thunder with this, but I'm sure you've all forgotten. So just recapping it, there is actually a definition of athleticism presented by Rodri Lloyd and John Oliver, and that is the ability to repeatedly perform a range of movements with precision and confidence in a variety of environments, which require competent levels of motor skills, strength, power, speed, agility, balance, and coordination. And in Kev's paper, they did a review of this, and as he said, only 2% of practitioners acknowledged the psychological components. So firstly, we've got to look at why practitioners don't recognise the physical and the psychological components. And secondly, bit Kevin didn't mention is that they refer to two psychological components, confidence and competence, whereas the definition presented only refers to confidence. So despite athleticism being a core construct of LTAD, we can see there's actually little consensus surrounding the meaning of athleticism. And perhaps confidence alone isn't the only psychological principle to truly meet LTAD principles. So the aims of our study were to explore practitioners' perceptions of athleticism and particularly look at the physical and the psychological. So what we did was a mixed method survey, and we got 167 participants. These were academic, strength and conditioning coaches, sports coaches, and practitioners working in a combined role such as myself. And then these practitioners work with youth from a variety of settings, whether this was in schools or in the performance pathway. So what we did was we measured their understanding of athleticism and tried to see how they would define athleticism. We looked at how importantly they perceived athleticism as a whole and the different constructs of athleticism. We looked at the current definition of athleticism, seeing how they perceive the importance of that and how they, if there's any characteristics they would add or any characteristics they disagreed with. And we looked at measuring athleticism and the challenges that are associated with this. Now, this is a lot to look at, so bear with me. What we did was we assessed importance on a Likert scale, with 5 being extremely important and 1 being not important at all. The numbers you can see are the means. On the left, we have all the characteristics that we looked at the importance of, and there you can see the specific subgroups. A few key findings from this. All practitioners perceive the physical characteristics to be more important than the psychological characteristics. Surprisingly, if we look at the differences between their perceived importances, motor skills and strength saw the biggest differences in perceived importance, and then less surprisingly, between self-esteem and perceived competence as well. Another interesting finding is that academics perceived almost all characteristics to be more important than every other subgroup. When we asked practitioners if they thought athleticism was a product, a process, or both, 56% of practitioners thought that athleticism was both a product and a process. So practitioners refer to a natural ability of athleticism. So we have our 2 people on the left, one with a natural higher ability than the other. But regardless of this, participants still believe that athleticism can and should be developed. But this process was not linear. It would progress and regress dependent upon the environment. The environmental factors were opportunities for play, exploration, and coaching, and also their psychological experiences and support of psychological experiences from coaches. Other participants referred to factors such as a holistic environment and the importance of fun or enjoyment being part of that process. When practitioners refer to the outcome of athleticism, they refer to it being observed or something that could be measured. So it was either something that could be observed on the pitch, like a skill, or it was an outcome that could be measured, such as a counter movement jump. So what is athleticism? So practitioners spoke about a physical, a psychological, and a cognitive component to athleticism. As well as describing the physical components that were already mentioned within the definition, other characteristics were also mentioned, such as change of direction, anaerobic capacity, mobility, and flexibility. Similarly with psychological, but there are a lot more components mentioned, such as self-esteem, resilience, motivation, and perceived competency. And something new that wasn't already presented within the definition was that cognitive side of things. So not only did the athlete need to have, or the individual need to have the ability to display the skill, but they also needed the cognitive ability to display the correct skill at the correct time. So these were factors such as decision-making and problem-solving. When practitioners were asked why athleticism was important, there were 5 main reasons. One being mental and physical health and well-being. So some practitioners were specific, relating the health reasons to specific reasons, but they couldn't really be specific in terms of how it would help them in terms of their mental health and well-being. They also mentioned for participation in physical activity and sport. So practitioners believe that a higher athleticism is associated with greater participation in physical activity and sport, enhanced physical and psychological characteristics. So participants believe that if you have a higher or building your athleticism will then build your confidence and your self-perceptions of your athleticism. And this was then later linked back into increasing participation in physical activity in sport. Also to decrease injury risk. So participants spoke about this in a performance and a non-performance setting. In a performance setting, it was referred to as it would help with training availability and effective training. And then to enhance performance. So a lot of participants spoke about athleticism being important to enhance successful performance, with participants even referring it as this characteristic between those that make it and don't make it. One participant said that there's athleticism in the context of sport and athleticism in the context of physical activity, and these are different things. And I felt as though the answers, particularly to this question, really reflected in this statement. So there was a lot of practitioners whose main purpose behind developing athleticism was for performance. And then there was a lot of practitioners who maybe focused on other things. And this was dependent upon the individual they were working with and the context they were working within. So what athleticism is, like was said earlier, there isn't really a general consensus around athleticism. There wasn't. So every practitioner pretty much described athleticism very differently. But if we have a look at the underlying themes, it was that athleticism is multifactorial. So it's complex. We can see that perhaps it's not just the physical characteristics we need to be developing, but having a look at what psychological characteristics we can develop, how can we educate them to help with their decision making and maybe develop their cognitive characteristics too. And it's also that athleticism needs to be adaptable. So we need to have a look at the individual we've got in front of us. We need to have a look at their maturity, their ability, and we also need to have a look at the context that we're working within. And perhaps all characteristics aren't relevant to you or to that individual, but we need to pick and select characteristics that are going to work for that athlete. As one practitioner said, athleticism isn't the same for everyone, and therefore our process also needs to be different.
Thank you, Lane. That was a really insightful part. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that project develops and how it goes forward. Any questions? Yep.
So you split athleticism into 3 different categories. How would you prioritise?
I don't think it is a case of necessarily prioritising the characteristics. I think it's a case of clearly they're all important, and maybe specific characteristics we need to select which are important for our individuals and the group we're working with. So whether we're very physical, that might depend upon the characteristic that we're working with, but I think it's important probably not to necessarily prioritise them and to make sure we are actually focusing on them all.
Why do you think there is that gap around where 2% of people talking around the psychological side versus the physical?
Really good question. So part B is follow-up interviews, which is something that we'd definitely love to explore. I think that what was mentioned in the survey is that a lot of practitioners, they don't know how to develop it, and they're maybe a little bit more scared about what that is and how are we actually going to improve someone's confidence and bring that into our sessions. So I think there's probably a lack of knowledge and understanding, and then it's just kind of how do we implement that.
Okay. Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks.